some of you about thoughts that you have and ways that we can work together. But having said all of that, even though there's a lot going on around us, we're going to do all we can to keep our conversation today very focused on where Florida is going with COVID-19 recovery efforts.
Mark,
we have
nobody can hear you. You got it? You as you work.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Sorry about that technical glitch. So I'm going to go ahead and move us forward. What I was talking about there was what's going on nationally, and that we're very aware that there's a very important conversation going on in our country right now on civil rights and on equality, and chambers of commerce are obviously going to play a big role, as we always do, in solving challenging problems. Our focus today, we're going to do the best we can, Dr. Parrish and I, to share some new information with you, to give you feedback on what you've told us. We're going to do the best we can to stay focused today on Florida's relaunch efforts. As I said when we first came on the line today, this is week 10 in a row of having our local chamber information exchanges. And so we're going to quickly go through our program today. We're going to share, as I said, new information. It is not too early to go ahead and start using the Q&A feature. Again, once we get to that part of our program, I will, as always, I'll moderate the questions, and then Dr. Parrish and I will try to answer them. We also have many of our grassroots or government relations team members, rather, dialed in, and they'll be listening to your questions or looking for your questions, and they'll be trying to provide some answers on the live FAQ section of the Florida Chamber's COVID-19 site as well. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and launch us forward. This is the outline of what we're going to follow today. And so, again, looking forward to a lot of feedback from you as we move forward. In terms of what to expect today, again, we're going to talk exclusively about COVID-19. Also, our hashtag Chamber Strong effort continues to build. We have more and more local chambers that are really leading in pretty amazing ways. I do want to spend a few minutes updating everybody on our move to virtual candidate schools. You're really helping us build that quite nicely, and I've added a few slides today to really show you where that program is, in case you're interested in engaging in it as well. Just before we went live today, I went ahead and grabbed sort of the global numbers on what's going on with COVID. And again, remember, we are going to hit 6.3 million cases sometime during our call today. And look at that Brazil number, it's over 500,000 now. And remember, Brazil is our third largest source of foreign travelers. And so as we look to continue to restart our economy and, we wonder when we're going to recover, Florida is different than many other states in that we need global trade and we need visitors from other countries. And so that's something we're paying very close attention to as well. It won't be long until the U.S. has 2 million cases, since day one. So something we're keeping a close eye on. I want to show you a bit of a change in what I've shown you before. As you know, for the first 9 weeks, I showed you Singapore as an example of something we wanted to make sure does not happen in Florida again. And remember, the Singapore situation, small country, only 6 million people, but they were down to only 3 new cases a day all the way back in March. They thought they were done. They went back to work, back to school. They started traveling again. And then in April, they had what everyone calls sort of a second spread or a resurgence. They then had to close down businesses, close down schools. What I want to direct your attention to this time, though, is a country, South Korea, that many in the United States have used as the model of how to do contact tracing and really how to jump on this. And so You can see they thought they had the problem handled. And again, many leaders across the world have used South Korea as the example of how to do this right. And again, I'm showing you this today because there's an increasing number of people who think, we're behind this and we don't need to be wearing masks and social distancing. And, when can we, quote, go back to normal again? And I show you this because South Korea is the one country that everybody's been looking to say if we can do it like they've done it, then we can probably go back to normal sooner. Some of you saw this news break late last week, and that is that even South Korea is now experiencing a second spread, and they've now had to close their schools again. And so, again, I'm not suggesting this is going to happen all over Florida. I'm simply suggesting if we let our guard down and we act like that there's a vaccine, or we act like this thing's not one of the most contagious viruses ever, then we're going to be sorry. And so I'm going to continue to put that in front of us. For those of you who participated in our statewide webinar last week with our CFO, Jimmy Patronis, where he talked a little bit about the state budget, you saw we showed this picture that originally was shared in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution recently. But here is a Georgia Tech football game from 1918 during the Spanish flu. And what's significant about this is, all the way back then, this virus killed somewhere around 675,000 Americans. And yet Americans were still going to sporting events. And all the way back then, 102 years ago, they were wearing masks. So I don't know what sporting events are going to look like this fall. But it wouldn't surprise me if they don't look sort of like Back to the Future discussion of how they looked all the way back in 1918. So something to be thinking about. Also, as the Florida Chamber begins to think about, how do we lead Florida going forward, even through a COVID environment, I want to remind everyone, the Florida Chamber and many of you are in partnership working on the Florida 2030 Blueprint. And what's important about that is, remember, our overall goal before COVID was to take Florida from the 17th largest economy in the world, if we were a country, of course, all the way to the 10th largest by 2030. And one of the 39 ways we're going to do that is to work in concert with you at the county and specifically zip code level to reduce childhood poverty in Florida, in fact, to cut it in half by the time we're at 2030. And as I told you all late last year and early this year, we've hired a full-time director of the Florida Chamber Foundation's Prosperity Initiative, Michael Williams. And between what Michael is doing and Tracy Lowe in our foundation, and especially Dr. Parrish with all the work that he's done on putting data and analysis together at the zip code level, we're going to be launching a series of virtual events that are specifically designed for businesses at the local level who want to help us attack poverty at the zip code level. And again, I'm just not in a position to tell any of you that you have to be involved in any of this, but I know some of you have specifically launched into and you want to lead the poverty efforts, the anti-poverty efforts that are going on in your backyard. And so we're going to be announcing these dates soon. We're going to be announcing, how to have your chamber participate in this. And I simply wanted to give you a web address there, the floridachamber.com/prosperity maps. Where you can begin to see what we're working on. But again, the goal here is to cut childhood poverty in half by 2030, and I can think of no better ground level leader than local chambers. And I appreciate all of you who are already taking a front row seat in this. So stay tuned. We'll be talking about this more in the coming weeks. And then also, many of you have contacted me. You're beginning to see local businesses be hit with the threat of lawsuits on COVID-19, and I actually have two slides on this. This one is an invitation for all of you to continue to sign on to our sign-on letter that the Florida Chamber and the U.S. Chamber are working in concert on to try to show our congressional delegation that no local business in Florida who's following the right safety protocols should be sued, from a COVID-19 situation when they followed the right CDC, OSHA, EPA guidelines. Again, we're very concerned about this, and I appreciate the overwhelming support of all of you who've called wanting to know what can we do, can we try to get a special session on this, what can we do to get our congressional delegation on board. The best thing you can do this week is to have your chamber join on to our sign-on letter so that we can get that moving forward. I want to take a little deviation from what I've done in the past in terms of using the Q&A feature at the end to take your questions. I want to pause here for a second and give you a real live update of some sort of breaking news that we've been aware of this week. And I'm going to do the best I can to explain it to you this way. So Governor DeSantis, when it comes to things like, remember when we had Halsey Beshears, the DPBR secretary, on 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they told us that, the local governments were going to decide whether, for example, short-term rentals could open. So in many of your counties, over 50 now, your county would submit a plan to the state, to DPBR, for short-term rentals. And if it was approved by the state, then you could, in fact, have short-term rentals open, and most all counties now have that open, so it worked exactly like it should. And then recently, Governor DeSantis, even though we're still technically in phase 1, Governor DeSantis has started to allow some of the phase 2 reopenings to already occur in phase 1. And so, for example, in the area of youth and sport activities, many of you are starting to see those businesses open back up. Another area that has been allowed to open back up are areas that are governed by essentially the amusement park or the amusement statutes. And I wanted to set it up that way and bring to your attention that I'm beginning to hear reports that as businesses are submitting their plans to counties, we're aware of a situation where a county is conditioning the opening up of that business on the business agreeing to indemnify and hold harmless the county, a unit of government, for any COVID-related viruses that happen to at least be blamed on that business being open. So think about it this way: if you've got a local shopping mall that has a zone where kids can come and play, but it happens to have games or trampolines or whatever it might be, and they happen to be governed by this deal where you have to go get approval from your county. Imagine the county saying, yeah, we'll approve your plan, but you have to hold the county harmless in case anybody ever gets COVID in your business. It's raising some red flags, and what I'm really curious about is if anyone else is seeing this in your counties, where your county is putting these kinds of almost ransom notes on a business's ability to open back up again. It's a concern here, but what I really want to know is how widespread is this happening? Is it only in 1 or 2 places, or is this beginning to catch on as something that local governments are going to do and require? I can tell you not many businesses, general counsels, or insurance companies would have them open up their business if they have to actually indemnify, a unit of government on something like COVID lawsuits. So raising this as a red flag because it's an early warning sign. I'm concerned about it, and I would appreciate it a personal favor if any of you could use the Q&A feature to just send me notes to let me know, you haven't seen anything like that, or yes, your county's doing something like this, whether it's on amusements or short-term rentals or anything else for that matter. Okay, I'm going to move us forward. I mentioned the local candidate school that we launched last fall that many of you are now in the process of taking advantage of. I personally put a few slides together for you on this because there's been, we knew there would be strong interest in this. There's been incredibly strong interest in this. And when we announced 3 weeks ago that we were pivoting this year away from in-person candidate schools to virtual candidate schools, it's literally allowed us to multiply the number of people that we can educate, and it's allowed us to significantly, exponentially actually multiply the number of candidate schools that we can do. Again, remember, the Florida Chamber does not endorse or get engaged in local elections. Never have, can't imagine we ever will. But we know that many of you are being asked by your members, you know, why don't we have better candidates running for office, for librarian, for tax collector, for school board, for county commission, city council, et cetera. And so we've taken our nearly 20 years of expertise with Marian Johnson and the Florida Chamber's Political Institute of interviewing candidates for the legislature, and we've now created a sister program for local office that many of you are putting your names on and moving forward with. So I want to just show you kind of where that stands, and if your chamber is interested, we certainly would want to work with you. So again, this is nonpartisan. It's about encouraging people to learn what open offices are coming down the road. This is not about getting rid of politicians or anything like that. This is about educating your membership on what offices are coming up in the coming years. And so, again, over the next 5 years, if you look at the bottom of this slide, in the next 5 years, if you put all 67 counties together, there's over 4,500 elections that are taking place. So imagine what would happen if chambers of commerce throughout Florida, even if you don't endorse in elections, imagine if your communications team made your membership and their employees aware of openings that were coming up on, again, everything from librarian to tax collector to school board. The more people that know how to sign the front of a paycheck that get interested in learning about running for office, I think the better off we'll all be. So here's just a quick snapshot of the next three that are already set up. And again, the first one's coming up in Volusia. So Nancy Kiefer, for you and your team there, thanks very much for sort of going first, if you will, on this. And again, any chamber that wants to work with us on this, you know, you can either all partner together in your region, or you know, we can do them separately. That's not our call, that's your call. But I wanted to give you just a quick look at least what three of these that are coming up look like. Also, I wanted to provide for you, here's sort of a working inventory list of who has contacted us, and we're trying to find dates that work with your calendar. I wanted to leave that up for a second only because there is so much activity going on right now between our relaunched Florida COVID-19 efforts with over 230 local chambers, or all the way to our Prosperity Initiative, or now all the way to our Florida Institute for Political Leadership. If we have somehow left your chamber off of this list, if you've contacted us and for whatever reason your chamber's not on here, you know, my apologies, but that's very, very easy to resolve. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. Here we have, again, this is the format for these. So, you know, we can either do, you know, morning session, afternoon session, or evening session. So for some of these, you know, we're doing some counties in the morning, and then we're doing different counties in the afternoon and different counties in the evening, and we're doing this over a 3-day period. And that's why we can do exponentially more of these in a Zoom environment than we ever could have in a sort of face-to-face physical environment. Here's how easy it is to let us know you're interested. Again, Rick Asnani is working with our 4-member political team at the Florida Chamber to get all of these scheduled and to get them on your calendars if you're interested. So Rick at FIPL.org, and then there's phone numbers on there. And again, this will all be in the presentation that we send out to you later today. Wanted to, again, I mentioned hashtag ChamberStrong, and I really appreciate how many of you are using this, because every time you do, it allows our team to sort of jump on and highlight the good works that you're doing in a social media environment. And so, again, I'm going to show you how to add your chamber to this list here in just a couple of slides. Dr. Jerry Parrish is actually taking front on this and taking point on this, and I'm going to show you how to get in touch with him in just a minute. If your chamber has added the COVID-19 county level scorecard and we don't have you listed here, again, my apologies. It's really cool. It's all happening very fast. We can actually add you to this list before this webinar is finished, if in fact we're missing someone. What I wanted to do is, instead of show you all of the local county COVID-19 slides like we showed our membership last Friday, I actually want to do a quick tutorial here on exactly what to look for when you do go to the county data. So this is the Florida Chambers COVID-19 tracker for the whole state, and I've circled in yellow there two of the most important numbers to look at, right? So this is yesterday, we're 91 days in. But if you look at this, the average number of new cases is going down, and the positive percent of testing is going down. And those are both required gating criteria from the White House to move into phase 2. So when I open this up every day, you'll want to see those two boxes as green. They're very important. Now, what I wanted to show you here, again, I'm not going to show all 30-some of these, but I just randomly picked some so you could quickly look at this and know when you wake up in the morning and you look at it to know, hey, is my county in the right direction, wrong direction, what are we doing here? So here's a quick look at Bay County, and if you just look at the two numbers, if I'm Carol and I wake up and I look at this, I think, okay, average number of cases 1.4 is blue. That's fine. That just means it's the same, that it hasn't changed, hasn't gone up, hasn't gone down. But your weekly percent positive has gone up. And look, 0.7 is really low, right, which is good. But nevertheless, what the White House wants, that to be green. So again, that's a quick way to read that. So that's what one county looks like. Let me shift over here to Palm Beach County. Here's Troy's COVID-19 scorecard. When Troy woke up and said, hey, cool, both of ours are green, right? Our number of cases are going down and our percent positive is going down. That's the kind of thing you want to see. And then, if you go same county, right, but a different day, right? What you would see here is cases were going up, positive was going down. Again, these are not taken in real time. These were taken in different days in the same county. But nevertheless, it shows you, what happens when they're not both headed in the right direction. And then, of course, to my friends in Lake County, special thanks for doing this. I hate to use you as an example. There's plenty of counties that look like this every once in a while. But again, both numbers headed in the wrong direction. Again, these are updated every day for all 67 counties. But again, this positions your chamber as the one group in town who every single day has the ability to share with your membership what's going on in your own community. So again, I told you that it's really easy to have your chamber added. If you haven't done this on your scorecard yet and you want to, it's simple. Just reach out to Jerry and his team will get back in touch with you. But if in fact you're already doing this and we've missed it, again, my apologies. It's super easy to add you back to our list that we're sharing with our membership as well. Just email Jerry and we'll take care of that here in the next couple of hours. The only other slide I had on ChamberStrong is I just wanted to give a shout out to our Palm City friends, simply because what I want everybody to notice is just like here at the Florida Chamber, right? So here's my mask, right? So every time we are in a common area here, we're all wearing masks, we're using hand sanitizer, we're checking our temperatures, every time we come into the building here. And anything all of you can do to show your business community that your staff at your chamber is in fact providing best practices for everyone else to follow, then that's really all I can ask. Because if I go back to the Singapore example or now the South Korea example, I truly believe that, as important as the White House leadership is and as incredibly important as Governor DeSantis' leadership continues to be, it's really going to be up to all of us to provide leadership at the local level to make sure that we're being safe and doing all we can to keep everybody COVID-free. Okay, for your calendar purposes, again, we do this every Tuesday morning, but our next statewide webinar is going to be June 12th. Lot of conversation around when's Florida going to officially move into phase 2. I don't really want to get into that today, but I think the middle of June is going to be a pretty important time frame for a lot of us for a lot of reasons. So be looking for special guest speakers on this one, and we'll just ask you to keep that date in mind. All right, I'm going to quickly go over some survey results, a couple other items, and then I'm going to get it turned over to Dr. Jerry Perisher as quickly as I can. Again, this is what you shared with us. So this is the issue. We sort of did a comparison in time for you here, and the issue here was unemployment compensation 3 weeks ago compared to now. 3 weeks ago, only 37% of employees were returning to work when their employers wanted them to. Now it's up over 51%. But look at that next one. Employees are not returning to work because they make more on unemployment. I want to tell you, when you all brought this to my attention 2 weeks ago, I've spent a lot of time with government officials up here in Tallahassee on this, and we're working on providing you something to share with your members, but I've worked very closely with the leaders at DEO, and one thing I can tell you unequivocally is if an employee is out on unemployment and they refuse to come back to work because they, quote, make more money on unemployment, then they immediately are supposed to cease receiving unemployment right then and there. And so one thing that employers can do is notify their employees that they're eligible to come back to work. If they're eligible to come back to work and able to come back to work and decide not to, then they're no longer eligible for their unemployment benefits. Obviously, I'm being Captain Obvious on that, but I think there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace. There seems to be this growing incorrect sentiment that an employee can choose not to come back to work and can choose to take the higher unemployment compensation. And that is absolutely a false narrative. That is not a choice that's available. And so arming employers with that information is one thing that we all in the chamber community can do to help local businesses push forward on this. This has to do, again, with the frivolous lawsuits that we know are coming on COVID. Again, I think what's important here is 2/3 of us know that this is coming. Only 6% are not concerned about these lawsuits coming. So again, that sign-on letter that we're asking you to participate with us on is one of the best ways that their chamber can take action in sort of a show of unity that we want to protect local businesses. Again, we're talking about something that's very targeted on COVID-19 only, and it's very timely, right? This would be a short-term remedy so that businesses can get back to work without the fear of a lawsuit hanging over their neck. Is your chamber using Chamber Strong in social media? About 60% of you are, and again, that's a growing number. We certainly appreciate it. Are your members more concerned about customers returning to work or employees returning to work? Here's what's interesting. About 6 weeks ago, it was about 36% of your members were concerned about customers coming back and about 8% employees. Look at this now. Everybody knows that the ball game is, will customers come back? And again, the Florida Chamber Safety Council is working on a set of criteria where businesses all over Florida can say, hey, we're a safe place to return to work. We're a safe place for customers to come back to. And remember what I shared with you a month ago or so that I shared with National Public Radio as well as the Wall Street Journal, and something I would encourage you to keep talking to your members about, and that is that pre-COVID, everybody competed on price, product, service, and now we're adding one more, right? Especially if you're a restaurant or a retailer, and that is, are you the safest, cleanest place in town? Do customers perceive that your restaurant or your retail establishment, cares deeply about the safety and health of people who are doing business with you? Are your employees wearing masks? Is there hand sanitizer everywhere? And so forth. Again, not to be Captain Obvious, but something we need to work on. And then, we always ask you, what are the big things you want us to cover today? Any word on a special session about the budget? I have a lot of word on special session on budget, and I think the word that I continue to hear in every corner that I ask is that it's not going to happen. Keep in mind, the state's budget year ends at the end of June. And by all accounts, whether it's the chief financial officer or other sources, by all accounts, the state of Florida has enough dollars to get it through the end of June. That doesn't mean it's not going to dip into reserves. It doesn't mean it's not going to dip into the federal dollars. But the word we're hearing is if Congress passes another round of stimulus, and if those dollars were required legislative action from the states, that could cause a special session to happen. But absent that, we're not hearing that there's going to be a big push and a big call. Again, this is very fluid. That could all change in 24 hours, but that's the latest. What's the tipping point factor to determine if and when a second COVID-19 wave is happening? We're in very close daily communications with the Department of Health. And I have to tell you, the daily COVID-19 county level tracker is the very, very best way. We put that there not only to help you lead your community, but we also put it there to be an early warning indicator so that local chambers would literally be the first groups to know if, in fact, there was a second wave coming at the local level. I mean, we're seeing spikes. Obviously, over the last week, I know our friends in Polk County have been concerned, and there's a few other places. But overall, the trend continues to be down, and there's literally no better source than the Florida Chamber, the Florida Scorecards county-level COVID tracker. When will gatherings of 10 or more be lifted? Listen, I have personally invested days into this topic, in talking nationally, in talking with state leadership, in talking with many healthcare experts in Florida, and also, work very closely with the church movement in this country. And, if you think about it, going back to church every week is an awful lot like, in some ways going to a chamber meeting, right? Close proximity, there's a speaker, right? You're shaking hands with people, maybe even hugging people once in a while. And what I can tell you is the conventional wisdom from the healthcare community is until there's a vaccine, right, don't expect this number to change much. The only way many healthcare professionals think this number is going to change is if you required the extensive use of masks. And so I bring up churches to say there's some national studies that were just conducted asking churchgoers when they're going to feel safe going back to church again. 30% said that they will not go back to church until there's a vaccine readily available. And another 30% said that they will not go back to church until a mask is not required. And by the way, that's a different 30% than the 30% that said they won't go back until there's a vaccine. So we're doing some extensive research here at the Florida Chamber, really trying to understand the Florida marketplace, and maybe we can all work together on that in the coming weeks to understand, when will all of our members collectively, be able to be in those situations. So this impacts bars. It impacts a lot of our members. It certainly impacts every local chamber in Florida. And so we're wondering the same thing you are, but I think we're all learning that it's not going to be lifted until the CDC and the Department of Health feel that it's safe to do so. Not our decision. I'm just reporting on what we're hearing. In terms of our task force activities, again, over 95% of you are using some some form, if not all, of the task force criteria. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today because I'm really pleased with the direction that it's heading. You know, keep in mind, you know, whenever Florida decides to move into phase 2, we will literally same day be reaching out to everyone, because one thing we all thought 8 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago when the White House unveiled all of this is that the whole country might follow the same time frame. And of course, every state's decided to not only follow their own time frame, but every governor has also decided to sort of pick and choose which portions of the plan they're going to move forward with and which portions they're not. And so we're going to have to pay very close attention to what the health data says and to what the Surgeon General decides and what the governor moves forward with. And again, we'll let you know as soon as we know and can talk publicly about it. Again, we're going to provide this. This is the very latest CDC updates. We're going to, again, provide this in what we send you later today, just so you have the very latest. We'll do this every week. In terms of what's going on in Washington, wanted to, you know, I wish there was better news to report in terms of some kind of bipartisan legislation, but three things I wanted to point out to you. One, the White House has, in fact, started talking about regulatory reform, and so the Florida Chamber's Litigation and Regulatory Reform Center, we're going to be asking all of you, you know, if there are regulations at the local level, think of ordinances or regulations at the 412 city, 67 county level, and we're certainly looking at the 34 state agency level, and or federal regulatory reform efforts that need to happen because of the COVID environment. We want to hear about it. Also, in terms of federal update, you know, just if you look at the bottom there, you know, unfortunately, despite everyone's best efforts all the way around the country, C6s were not added to the legislation last week. But I also want you to take a look at how many companies are in fact receiving the PPP loans. And so we'll continue to provide more updates on this. In fact, I have another slide here to show you what this looks like in terms of who's receiving the loans. Also, we did a big webinar last week on child care, and we're part of a national sign-on letter. I'm really proud of the U.S. Chamber for providing some national leadership on this. Keep in mind, about half of all child care centers are closed, and it's going to be awfully hard to get everybody back to work again if we don't have a very robust child care, private child care system up and running. So it's I realize the crisis that we're in. It's a big deal. We're working as much as we can. I appreciate our folks in Martin County were on the phone with me yesterday, you know, trying to get clarity on, you know, can we use our schools for youth programs throughout the summer. I talked to Commissioner Corcoran about that yesterday. He believes the answer is yes, and they're actually working on getting some language out in the coming week that might help clarify that. And again, we'll share that with you when we get a copy of it. But I appreciate, again, it's another example of local chamber bringing something to my attention, and we were able to immediately get it to the right people, and the right people are trying to do the right thing, and we certainly appreciate that. Okay, in terms of where are the loans coming from, this is obviously a national number. And again, I'm not providing this right now so that we can go through it all in great detail right now. I'm simply providing it so that later on you can match this up against your membership or against your local market and see, again, these are not necessarily Florida numbers. They're inclusive of Florida numbers, but this will give you a national snapshot of how many loans and what sectors they're going to. And then you can extrapolate that to what does it mean for your membership. So with that said, I am going to give up the microphone and video here for a while. I'm going to turn this over to our chief economist, Dr. Jerry Parrish. Again, he has brand new information to share with you today. And then once he concludes, a few more things, and then we're going to go right back into our Q&A section for the rest of our time today. Thanks. Jerry?
Thanks, Mark. Glad to be here today with everyone. I want to show you a couple of things. We've made a couple of changes to the Florida scorecard I want everybody to know about. Also going to talk a little bit about the Florida budget here. So let me see if I can figure out how to share my slides. Somebody's disabled me here, so let me try that again. Looks like it's not going to come up. Here we go. Now it's going to work. All right, here we go. All right, excellent. Now, you can see the front page of the Florida scorecard. Just printed it a little earlier this morning. You see where the circle is? If you'll think about the way it looked just even a week ago, in that slot we had the initial unemployment claims. We got those. They come out every Thursday, and they're for the previous week. But what we found is, Florida would have 2 million unemployment claims, but only 1.4 million of them were unique. And so we had this on the state level and the county level, so we've changed it. The state level is what you see now. This is the same tile we've actually got inside the scorecard. It's the number of open jobs and the number of people who are unemployed, that 1.22 million now. And, if you click on those, you'll get the history of those. A chart will pop up. Now, if you read the morning email this morning from the Florida Chamber, and if you're not getting it, you can sign up at floridachamber.com/coronavirus. You would have seen this map. We've gone to reporting every single day, the average daily increases. You can also see the other numbers, number of people hospitalized. Note there that more than 1 million people now have been tested for COVID-19 in the state of Florida. And the percent positive now, 5.5%. That's literally that 56,830 people who have tested positive out of that 1.04 million test right there. You can see the death numbers, 2,460. The good news, I think, is the number of deaths is flattening out in Florida. That's a really good sign, and so I'm glad to see that. All right, I want to show you something. I haven't shown this in a little while. I'm about to show your county here in a minute, but I want to put the number of cases in Florida into perspective. So I put New York City up here and New York State. New York City, a little over 200,000 cases versus Florida's 56,000 or so. New York State, 372. They're the closest state in population out there. A little less population than Florida. As you know, we overtook them about 2 or 3 years ago. But when you think about the number of people in these states and in the city and in the state, 1 out of every 41 people in New York City has tested positive for coronavirus. New York State, 1 out of every 52. They have rural areas just like Florida has, so that's probably a really good comparison here. I want to show you what Florida sits. Only 1 out of every 378. So I got out my calculator and figured out what that is. Basically, if you're an individual person, you're 7.3 times as likely if you live in New York State than if you live in Florida to have tested positive for COVID-19. If you live in New York City, it's 9.2 times. I hope this kind of puts it into perspective, what we're looking at in Florida here compared to a similarly populated state like New York State. You've seen them on the news a lot, and I want to show you as well where your county is. If you'll remember, it's probably been 4 or 5 weeks ago, maybe 6, since I showed you your county and the number of people per case. But if you'll remember back in those days, Miami was number 1, Broward and some of the other counties were number 2. Something substantially different now when we look at the population per case. It's actually shifted to Florida's rural counties. And you can see there, Florida on the left, 378. Liberty County, 1 out of every 39 people. Hamilton, 1 out of 60. And you can see on down the list, Miami-Dade is certainly still high, but they're not the highest in the state anymore like they were. So you can see where your county sits. What's happened a lot in like Liberty County and Jackson County and some of the others, we've had really big concentrations in our correctional institutions in Florida as they have in other parts of the country. We've had nursing homes, we've had correctional institutions. That makes up for a really high percent of the cases in a lot of counties. And certainly it makes up for a high percentage of the deaths that we've seen. I read something the other day, more than 40% of the cases in Florida, the deaths have actually occurred in nursing homes around the state. That gives you a little perspective about where your county is, where Florida is, in at least in context with New York. Now, what's this doing to the economy? I wanted to talk about this. I took a look at our economic and demographic research. That's what you see down there, data source EDR. That's the the part of the legislature that's responsible for forecasting all kind of economic things. And I wanted you to see, they had a revenue estimating conference in January of 2020, and these are the differences in what they had forecast and what had actually happened. So take a look at the numbers. Net general revenue. Remember now, 79% of Florida's general revenue comes from sales and use taxes. So, lack in spending by tourists certainly has affected this. But we were running above expectations for December, January, February, and March. Matter of fact, you can see the cumulative numbers down there on the bottom. As far as March, we were $202 million ahead in general revenue compared to what we expected to be. And so we were sitting pretty good, as you can see that. Unfortunately, April comes in, and here's what the numbers look like. With an expectation of nearly $3 billion, we were behind about $878 million. That puts us in a net situation since this report came out of about $675 million less. Now remember, we still have May and we still have June to contend with for this budget year. Certainly May will get around the 20-something to the 25th of the month later on this month, and so we'll be able to see that. We certainly would expect another pretty big negative number in May, but you got to remember that toward the end of May, a lot of businesses reopened. A lot of them, restaurants were back open at 50%. A lot of things were happening. So you may well see the worst of it in April and May. That's certainly my expectation as we get to recover. One of the other things we saw this morning come out was Visit Florida released the tourism estimates for the first quarter of this year. And we were down about 10%. So that, loss in, the middle and later in March certainly knocked down our visitor numbers. You got to remember, visitors pay a lot of our taxes in the state of Florida. Those people from other states and other countries are responsible for about $6 billion plus in state tax revenue and about $5.3 billion in local tax revenue. So with those numbers down about 10% even during the first quarter, certainly the second quarter is going to be a tough quarter like everybody has forecast. We certainly will see record lows for recent years when we see those numbers. I want to go back to show the county level. I just picked Seminole County as one of them. This is what you see on all the county scorecards now, and I appreciate those local chambers. You saw some of them that were on there. I've actually gotten notes while we've been on this call from Brandon Chamber, Greater Fort Myers Chamber, Greater Daytona Chamber, and Indian River County Chamber. They have also joined the club of putting these COVID-19 tiles on their website, and I encourage you to do that. Just contact me. We can get you the code to put it on there. In some cases, people have contacted us back in less than 30 minutes saying, hey, it's up on the website. Take a look at it now. So we certainly appreciate that. The big number there I want everybody to focus on as we've changed going from the initial unemployment claims to just the actual number of unemployed people. That's a new thing that we've put on the scorecard. We've never had that on there, but I think that's a really good indicator. And what you can do is you can click on that, and it'll show January of 2020 through current time. So you can see that January was probably very low number of people. February was even lower. It bumped up in March and then April. And you can download that chart You can download the raw data behind it, just like you can on most of the tiles of the scorecard. Please share that with your local newspapers, your local businesses, that are interested in this, your county commissioners, because that's the real number we have to pay attention to. How many people are still looking for work? And so the last slide I'm going to show is I just showed the increase here. How many more people are unemployed in your county since February 20? So this is over a 2-month period. These are the numbers of people who are actually looking for work. And you can see it once again if you click on your county and see the history, the recent history of that. And that's the number we're going to have to look at. February 2020 is going to be the low point, and then we'll go from there. On this will be a great way to be able to track our recovery. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share this morning. Thanks, Mark. I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Jerry. I am going to take back over the screen here and let's see here. Where did we leave off here? Let me see here. Yep. So what I want to do now is, so Jerry, thanks very much for that. It's awesome when I get to see the data at the same time everybody else does. It's pretty cool. So listen, here's the deal. I have a number of questions that have come in, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to kind of do a speed round here. First of all, at the beginning of our call today, I know we had a technical difficulty on sound, and I want to let you know I feel your pain. I know what it's like to run a chamber, and I want to thank you. I was looking while Dr. Parrish was speaking, the number of you that reached out to me in the chat feature to tell me, hey, Mark, your sound isn't working and the technical difficulties, et cetera. I really appreciate that. But then I read Troy McClellan's, and it said, Mark, we can't hear you. I wish we couldn't see you. So, thanks, Troy. I love you too. Just want to let you know we're all in this together. And then also several more notes about what I said about unemployment insurance. And so the concern many of you have is that there's not currently a policing mechanism. So, employers cannot go to the DEO and say, hey, my employee is refusing to come back, cut off their unemployment insurance. I've been doing this a long time. Trust me, I'm very aware of that. But that's exactly what we've been working with them on is what can we provide employers to make it very clear to employees that they actually don't have that choice. The problem we have is there's beginning to be a growing narrative on social media and in other places where people think they do have the choice. And what we can do, absent a policing mechanism, is we can dramatically ramp up our communication efforts to arm employers with what the law says, that there's actually not a choice. The employee's choice is come back to work or lose their job, but they cannot continue to draw unemployment if, in fact, they simply refuse to come back if they're able-bodied and that position is open. And all we're simply saying is we're working on a solution for that, and I hope to be able to talk more about it next week. So sorry if I offended some of you by suggesting that we're working on a solution. We're aware there's not a policing mechanism for that right now. And then finally, I'm going to go back to the key questions now. There's several of you asked questions about with what's going on with civil unrest all around our country with the National Guard being brought in. Will the past week's events slow the phasing in, moving to phase 2 and eventually to phase 3? We don't see evidence of that, but nonetheless, it's certainly, we're certainly seeing picketing going on all over, and worse, it's happening here in Tallahassee, and everybody has a right to do that. It's clearly taking time and taking focus, important time and focus, by the way. It's an incredibly important issue. So we've not seen evidence of that, but nonetheless, it's certainly possible, and I appreciate everybody bringing that question to our attention, and we'll be looking at it more fully. Some of you said that you want to sign on to the sign-on letter for COVID-19 relief on the liability side. A couple of you had technical problems there. We will get back in touch with you specifically one at a time. There's another question here about restaurants being able to open again, and I want to provide some clarity on this. Let me get back to that question for a second. So a question here is, it said, with restaurants being allowed to operate in a 50% capacity, actually there's two questions on that, and they're different, so let me go back to this. So the first question said, why was South Florida, particularly Miami-Dade, allowed to open restaurants at 50% capacity while the rest of the state can only open at 25% capacity? And just to clear the air on that, the entire state is allowed to be at 50% capacity. The governor did that a couple of weeks ago. The only areas in Florida that would be less than 50% capacity is if the local government is not allowing restaurants in your backyard to go to the state. But the entire state's at 50%. So I'm not sure where that information's coming from. I know who asked it. Happy to reach out to you later, or you to me, if you're hearing something different locally. With restaurants being permitted to operate at 50% capacity, can chambers hold networking events if the restaurant capacity allows for it, or are we limited to gathering restrictions of no more than 10 people? It's our understanding, I've asked this question probably a dozen times, it's our understanding that 10 people in a room still governs kind of how this operates. If you want to do something outside, you know, you're much more free to do so, but it's our understanding, and I know that our government relations team is listening into this call, and they'll be the first ones to correct me if I'm wrong. When we send out our post message today with a copy of this presentation, we will have a bullet point on there verifying that I'm right or verifying that I'm not. But Bill, we appreciate that question. It's a good one. It's a live one. It impacts all of us, and we'll verify that when we send our notice out today. Again, a lot of you are weighing in on what I said earlier about is your county requiring indemnification in order for businesses to get plans approved, and I appreciate all the feedback I'm getting on all of that. And many of you are saying your chamber's using #ChamberStrong in the COVID-19 scorecard, and we'll make sure we get you listed, so thank you for that. Apologies for missing. It's just happening so fast. It's a good problem to have. A couple questions on unemployment. I think we covered some of that. Let's see. There are several questions on here asking me where can you find the verbiage I was talking about, where businesses can show their employees that they're going to lose the benefits if they don't return to work. We're working on that verbiage together with the state, and we hope to have that in the next 24 to 48 hours, but certainly in time for next week's call. I simply wanted to give everybody an early indicator that this is where we're heading with this, absent, you know, any kind of enforcement opportunity that we have. Let's see. Is there a Jerry, you may know this question. Is there a cross-check between those receiving PPP and also applying for unemployment? Can they receive both? Not so sure because, you know, PPP in most cases is for the employer, and the unemployment's for the, you know, for the individual. I suppose there may be some 1099 or some gig workers who are trying to get unemployment, but I don't know how they would also be qualifying for a business loan. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I don't, Mark.
Okay. Look, we're living in a strange world right now, so I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's really two different programs. And so again, I know Carolyn Johnson and Frank and our GA teams listening in. So maybe our Small Business Council has come across this problem before, but it's a new one on me. So we'll have our team pursue that, and we'll again update everybody when we send that out later today.
Mark.
So,
Mark,
Dr. Parrish, you got one more thing?
I do. Carolyn Johnson just sent me a note that says you can't get both at the same time.
Okay.
Can't get PPP and unemployment at the same time.
Got it. So for the minutes of the meeting, the Carolyn Johnson agreed with both of us today. So we need to play the lotto, I think. It's a good day. Thank you, Carolyn, for being so quick on that answer. We appreciate it. Okay, everybody, that exhausts the questions that we have. I do want to acknowledge, I'm going to go to Dr. Parrish, I think, for one more point, but I do want to acknowledge I'm seeing a high number of communications to me through the Q&A and the chat feature of you want to make sure we add your chamber to the scorecard. I'm seeing about a half dozen chambers who want to be part of our the Florida Institute for Political Leadership. But we will not leave here today until all of you are added and until we've communicated with all of you today. That's exactly what I was asking for, and I rather than list you all, I wanted to tell you I appreciate that. So, Jerry, I think you had one more point.
I do. The question that has come up, one of our own staff members has answered about employers being able to report employees that won't return to work. They've got it on our FAQ page on the chamber, but basically what it says is you can either log into the Connect portal or you can call the employer contact line. And I'm going to give everybody a second to find a pin, but it's on the FAQ page. You know, they can call DEO at 1-833-352-7759. according to our own chamber staff, Frank Walker. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so Frank and Jerry, thank you for that. And look, I don't want to open up a can of worms here or kick an anthill, but I would say this is a very, very hot topic, and I don't want to name names, but I wish I could. I cannot thank some of the leaders at DEO and the governor's office. When you all brought this to my attention 2 weeks ago, we started doing research. Last week, I could tell this was beginning to be a crisis. I hung up from all of you and literally called over and all told spent a couple of hours getting some answers, working directly with leadership. And all I was simply trying to say today is I'm really proud of our team for putting that on our COVID-19 site already. All I'm trying to say is we're going to provide some additional resources. Our hope is, you know, if 230 local chambers are sharing with local businesses, you know, kind of what to do here and how to provide clarity, that's going to make a difference. And I hope we can all work together on that. So again, to the team, thanks very much. I want to thank everybody for your time today. Be on the lookout for more guest speakers we have coming up. There's obviously a lot of change in the air over the next couple of weeks. And again, as I said earlier, we're sort of bookended by the awesomeness of successful rocket launch sending humans back from Florida soil, you know, but on the other hand, our national crisis that we're in right now on a very important civil rights conversation. And I'm just, it's an honor to be working with all of you as we try to unify together and work our way through this. So God bless everybody. Hang in there, be safe, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.